there comes a time after the confusion, the silence, and the withdrawal when something shifts, not in you, but in the one who let you go, the avoidant, the person who made you feel like you were asking for too much when all you ever wanted was connection. And when that moment of regret hits them, it doesn't come with flowers or an apology, it shows up in subtle, unmistakable ways. But by the time they realize what they've lost, you might already be gone. When an avoidant regrets losing you, it won't be loud, it will be quiet. It'll be hidden in the way they scroll through your stories but don't reach out. It will be in the way they send a "just thought of you" message at 2 a.m., hoping you still care. It's not romantic. It's not healing. It's evidence of the one truth you must remember. They only miss you when you've stopped waiting. You see, avoidants don't feel safe in intimacy, not because of you, but because closeness threatens their comfort zone. They push people away not to hurt them, but to protect themselves. But here's the catch. When you finally choose your peace over their chaos, when you stop chasing, explaining, and justifying, they start feeling the emptiness they once created. You were the calm in their storm. You showed up. You stayed. You gave love in a way that made them feel seen, but they didn't know how to receive it, not until you walked away. And now their regret doesn't come in words. It comes in patterns. Patterns of return. Patterns of guilt. Patterns of just checking in. But checking in isn't showing up. Curiosity isn't commitment. A memory isn't a promise. Don't fall for breadcrumbs. Don't romanticize someone finally noticing your worth only after you've removed access to it. Their regret isn't a reason to reopen the door. It's a reminder that your absence carries weight and your presence was never the problem. The greatest revenge on someone who didn't value you is not making them regret. It's making yourself free. Because when you choose peace, growth, and someone who doesn't need to lose you to realize your value, you win. When an avoidant begins to regret losing you, they don't make some dramatic return or deliver a grand apology. In fact, what makes it so confusing is how subtle it all feels. There's no clear message that says, "I miss you," or "I shouldn't have let you go." Instead, what you notice are small shifts, small behaviors that wouldn't mean much on their own, but together form a pattern that speaks more than their words ever could. It's in the silence that suddenly feels a little louder, in the messages that come out of nowhere, in the sudden liking of a post they ignored months ago. Regret doesn't always arrive wrapped in clarity. It often comes wrapped in confusion. One of the most common things people experience after walking away from an avoidant partner is a strange return, but not a full return. It's not them coming back and saying, "I want to work this out." Instead, it's a "How have you been?" or a comment on something random that gives them an excuse to talk to you. Maybe they respond to your story with a laughing emoji. Maybe they ask a pointless question about something you know they don't really care about. It feels low effort, but it's intentional. They want to see if the door is still open, but they don't want to risk vulnerability to find out. It's emotional window shopping. They're not buying, they're just browsing, seeing if you'll still react, still engage, still be there. What makes this especially painful is that it can stir up hope. Because part of you thinks, maybe this means something, maybe they finally realized. But if you look closer, you'll see that these behaviors are more about soothing their own discomfort than actually repairing the relationship. It's not about fixing the past. It's about trying to relieve their own emotional tension in the present. They don't know how to sit with regret, so they reach out, not to reconnect deeply, but to feel momentarily better. These quiet signals of regret can be especially manipulative if you don't recognize them for what they are. Because when someone who was emotionally unavailable starts showing small signs of interest again, your brain lights up. It remembers the connection, the potential, the story you told yourself about how things could have been. But if they haven't changed, if they're still incapable of real closeness, then all you're getting is a reminder of what it feels like to almost be loved. And almost being loved is one of the most painful places to live. People who regret losing you, but haven't done the inner work to show up differently will often try to regain access to you without earning it. They'll drop in and out. They'll give just enough to keep you curious, but not enough to make you secure. They'll keep the conversation shallow. They'll show up in ways that feel nostalgic, but not accountable. That's not real regret. That's fear of losing control. That's missing the feeling you gave them without respecting the effort you invested. Understanding that regret doesn't always come in the way you hope is part of emotional maturity. We want closure, clarity, and accountability. But more often, we get breadcrumbs, ambiguity, and half efforts. That's why it's so important to pay attention not just to whether they come back, but how they come back. If it's not with growth, with truth, and with consistency, then their regret is just a whisper of what could have been, not a sign of what will be. Avoidants often don't realize what they've lost until the emotional energy they've been feeding off disappears completely. While you were in their life, actively showing love, care, and commitment, they may have pulled away, withdrawn, or dismissed your efforts. To them, intimacy often feels suffocating. Your love, no matter how genuine or secure, felt like pressure, and so they created distance. But the irony is that they only begin to miss what you offered when it's no longer available to them. They don't feel the emptiness when you're still emotionally involved. They feel it when you stop waiting, when you let go, and when you finally choose yourself over the relationship. In the beginning, they may not have even noticed your absence. They believed you'd always be there, ready to answer their messages, forgive their disappearances, and continue loving them through their inconsistencies. But when you start pulling away, when your energy, attention, and hope are no longer directed at them, they begin to sense something's changed. There's no more reassurance from you. No more "are you okay?" or "I miss you." No more emotional checking in. And that quietness is loud to them. They feel it in their bones. What's powerful about this shift is that it doesn't require you to say a single word. You don't have to make a dramatic exit or explain your silence. Your emotional detachment speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. When someone who is avoidant starts to feel that you're no longer emotionally present, their subconscious registers a loss. A true, deep loss. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you stopped waiting for them to return it. There's a strange discomfort they feel when they realize the attention they used to take for granted is gone. When you were emotionally invested, they felt a sense of control. They knew that if they disappeared, you'd reach out. If they pulled away, you'd come closer. But now, you're not reacting. You're no longer orbiting their emotional availability. And that scares them, not because they're suddenly ready to show up properly, but because they're no longer in control of the connection. They can't predict you anymore. That unpredictability, for someone who is avoidant, creates anxiety. They may not admit it or show it clearly, but they feel it deeply. This is when the late night messages start. This is when they watch every story you post. When they comment on your life in small ways, just enough to let you know they're still around, but not enough to offer real change. It's a test to see if you still care, if you'll still respond, if the door is still cracked open. But what they're really doing is trying to calm their own fear of being truly left behind. Not the fear of losing you necessarily, but the fear of being completely cut off from the comfort you once gave them. When you stop waiting, you create space for truth, not just in them, but in yourself. You start to see their behavior not as something you need to fix, but as something you can't carry anymore. You reclaim your energy and begin to understand that love shouldn't feel like convincing someone to stay. That kind of peace sends a message more powerful than begging ever could. You're not angry. You're not cold. You're simply done. And that calm detachment, that quiet absence, becomes undeniable proof that you're no longer holding space for someone who didn't value it when they had it. So when they start to miss you, it's not your words they miss. It's your energy. It's the comfort, the emotional presence, the validation they used to receive just by being near you. And now, without it, they're left facing what they didn't appreciate when it was right in front of them. That's the power of letting go. Avoidants aren't afraid of love, but they are afraid of what love requires: vulnerability, emotional exposure, and the unpredictable closeness that comes with deep connection. To them, intimacy isn't just about being seen. It's about being seen and then judged, hurt, or abandoned. Somewhere in their emotional development, they learned that closeness is risky. Maybe they grew up feeling like their needs were too much, or that affection always came with conditions. So even though they crave connection just like anyone else, they've built internal defenses to protect themselves from what they fear will inevitably follow rejection or emotional suffocation. This is why, when someone begins to genuinely care for them, their first instinct is often to pull back. It doesn't make logical sense to the person on the receiving end. You're showing up with kindness, consistency, and love, and yet they retreat. But to an avoidant, that retreat feels like survival. Your emotional availability forces them to confront their own emotional walls, and rather than let those walls down, they build them higher. They become distant, dismissive, cold, or even sarcastic. It's a coping mechanism designed to protect, not to punish. When an avoidant person starts to develop feelings, they enter into an internal conflict. On one hand, they feel drawn to the safety and comfort of your presence. On the other, they feel trapped by the closeness that presence invites. They may even say things like, "I'm not good at relationships," or "I just need space," or "I don't know what I want." These aren't lies, they're expressions of that internal push-pull dynamic. They fear losing their autonomy and being consumed by another person's expectations, even if those expectations are completely healthy and reasonable. It's important to understand that this struggle isn't about you. It's not a reflection of your worth, your actions, or your love. In fact, often the more loving and secure you are, the more it triggers the avoidant's internal fear. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your security shines a light on their emotional unavailability. They begin to fear that they won't be able to meet your needs, and rather than risk failing or disappointing you, they preemptively pull away. It's like emotional self-sabotage. If they leave first, they don't have to experience the pain of being left. That's why so many people who love avoidance end up feeling like they're constantly chasing. They're trying to prove they're safe, that their love is real, that they're not going to abandon the avoidant. But the more they try to convince, the more the avoidant retreats. It's a cycle of closeness and withdrawal where one person is always reaching while the other is always retreating. What's heartbreaking is that avoidants often carry deep loneliness. They long for connection just as much as anyone else, but their fear of being hurt or overwhelmed keeps them from receiving it fully. And unless they do the inner work to heal and feel safe in closeness, they'll continue to push away the very relationships they want. That's why loving an avoidant can feel like trying to hug a cactus. There's something warm in the center, but it's protected by layers of defenses. When an avoidant regrets losing someone, it's often because they realize too late that the connection they feared was actually the safety they needed. But regret without healing doesn't lead to change. Unless they confront their fear of intimacy and learn to feel safe in love, the cycle will repeat. Love isn't their enemy, but the vulnerability that comes with it terrifies them. That's why they run, not from you, but from the closeness your love invites. When someone begins to regret losing you, especially an avoidant, they often return in small, inconsistent ways that create hope without offering any real certainty. They don't come back with accountability or a clear desire to rebuild things the right way. Instead, they drop breadcrumbs, tiny signals of interest that keep you emotionally tied without requiring them to invest in anything meaningful. These breadcrumbs might look like a random message on a quiet night, a comment on your social media post, or even a nostalgic mention of something you both once shared. But none of these things represent true emotional commitment. They're gestures of comfort, not change. What makes breadcrumbs so confusing is that they mimic effort without any real substance. They say, "I miss you," without ever saying, "Let's talk about what went wrong." They say, "I was thinking of you," without offering a conversation about what they're willing to do differently. And for someone who once loved deeply, who gave everything to try and make the connection work, even these small gestures can feel meaningful. They can reignite old hopes and dreams, especially if you haven't fully healed or let go. It's easy to think that maybe this time they're ready. Maybe this time they finally get it. But people who truly regret losing you don't play with your emotions. They don't send out breadcrumbs just to keep you within reach. They come back with clarity. They take responsibility. They show you, not just in words, but in consistent action, that they understand what they lost and that they're ready to do the work to not lose it again. Anything short of that is just a shadow of love, not love itself. It's not romantic to be half chosen. It's not healthy to be occasionally remembered. The danger in accepting breadcrumbs is that it delays your healing. Every time you respond to a vague message or a nostalgic emoji, you reopen emotional wounds. You begin to re-engage with someone who may not be emotionally capable of giving you what you need. You wait. You hope. You imagine, and in that space, you once again become emotionally invested in someone who still isn't showing up for you. Their regret becomes a tether, keeping you stuck in the past while convincing you there might be a future. Breadcrumbs also speak to emotional immaturity. Someone who is emotionally mature will not risk confusing or hurting you just to satisfy their curiosity or ease their loneliness. They will have the courage to speak with honesty. They will ask for a real conversation. They will acknowledge the pain they caused and demonstrate a willingness to grow. When someone lacks that maturity, what you'll see instead is inconsistency, vagueness, and indirect attempts to reconnect without actually committing. One of the hardest but most powerful things you can do is not respond. When you choose not to feed into the breadcrumb cycle, you take back your power. You send the message that your heart is not a playground, that your emotions aren't available for occasional use, that if someone wants you in their life, they have to show up fully, not sporadically. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, and accepting breadcrumbs teaches them that minimal effort is enough to keep you emotionally engaged. Sometimes people don't come back because they want to love you better. They come back because they miss the version of themselves they were when you were in their life, or they miss the comfort you gave them without ever matching your emotional investment. That's not love, that's need. And there's a big difference. The more you recognize that real connection requires consistency, honesty, and growth, the easier it becomes to walk away from anything less, even if it once felt like everything you wanted. There is a quiet kind of power that comes when you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your heart, and stop waiting for someone to finally see your worth. When you remove yourself from someone's life, especially someone who took your presence for granted, your absence speaks in a way your words never could. It's not about playing games or trying to manipulate someone into realizing what they lost. It's about choosing your own peace over emotional confusion. When you walk away without drama, without one last plea, without a long message trying to make them understand, you send the clearest message of all you're done, giving where there is no reciprocity. Avoidants, in particular, often don't recognize your value while they still have access to you. As long as you're emotionally available, they assume you'll always be there. They might not consciously think this, but their actions show it. They dismiss your needs, create distance, avoid emotional intimacy, and pull away when things get too real. And yet, when you finally decide to stop chasing them, when your texts go silent, your energy shifts, and your attention is no longer centered on them, that's when they notice. Not because they're ready to love you the way you deserve, but because the stability they took for granted is suddenly gone. This moment of realization is powerful, but it's also deceptive, because while they may begin to feel the void your absence has created, that feeling alone is not proof of change. Regret does not equal growth. Missing someone is not the same as being ready to meet their emotional needs. What your absence truly reveals is how much of an emotional anchor you were in their life. You were the one who cared. You were the one who stayed. You were the one who brought safety, love, and consistency. When that disappears, it becomes painfully clear just how much space you are holding for them. But here's the truth. Your absence isn't meant to teach them a lesson. It's meant to protect your heart. It's meant to create space for your own healing. For too long, you were overextending yourself, trying to fix something that wasn't yours to fix. You kept hoping that if you just communicated better, loved harder, or were more patient, they would finally open up. But real connection doesn't come from overfunctioning. It comes from mutual effort, emotional safety, and shared values. When you finally stop explaining your worth and start living in it, everything changes. You stop looking backward. You stop asking, what could I have done differently? You realize that your value was never the problem, it was their capacity to receive it. And once you let go of the need to be understood by someone who was never trying to understand you, you set yourself free. That freedom radiates. It sends a message not just to them, but to the world. You are no longer available for anything less than what you deserve. This shift is not cold and it's not heartless. In fact, it often comes after you've felt everything deeply. After the night spent wondering what went wrong. After the tears, after the silence, it comes from a place of emotional clarity. You've given enough. You've stayed long enough. And now, without bitterness or resentment, you simply choose peace. That peace becomes your boundary. It becomes the space where you no longer accept inconsistency as a form of affection. You no longer entertain people who can't meet you where you are. In the end, your absence is not about making someone chase you. It's about reclaiming your energy and choosing to direct it where it's valued. It's about understanding that if someone only realizes your worth once you're gone, they never truly saw it when it mattered. And that, in itself, is your answer. And so, if you're sitting there wondering whether an avoidant regrets losing you, remember this: it's not in what they say, it's in what they do. Regret doesn't come wrapped in perfect words or apologies. It comes through energy, through the subtle shifts, through the silence they used to crave and now fear. But more importantly, the focus should never be on whether they regret losing you. The focus should be on why you had to lose yourself to be loved in the first place. You are not here to be almost chosen. You are not here to wait for someone to heal at your expense. You are not here to carry the emotional weight of two people in a relationship. Love should not feel like trying to convince someone that you are enough. You were enough before they left. You are enough after they're gone, and you will be enough long after their regret fades into silence again. Walk with grace. Let your absence echo with dignity. And when they remember you, and they will, it won't be because you begged to stay. It will be because you chose yourself. That is the kind of energy they'll never forget. Thank you for listening, for showing up for your own healing, and for being brave enough to choose peace over chaos. You deserve a love that doesn't require translation, that doesn't arrive late, and that doesn't need to lose you to recognize your value. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and never forget your worth. Goodbye, and thank you